Hi, this is Kristen, and welcome to Cultivated. I've spent an embarrassing amount of time planning my zombie apocalypse strategy, and it all comes down to one problem: my glasses. So today, I'm reading you something about glasses. Not the kind that hold wine, though honestly, those might be more useful in a zombie apocalypse. This is the kind that help you see in the world clearly, or at least clearly enough to distinguish between actual threats and the elaborate disaster scenarios your brain likes to cook up at 2 a.m. It's called Seeing Clearly: Glasses, Apocalypses, and the Art of Strategic Worry. Wearing glasses is a drag. The challenges trouble me more than the pleasure I take in purchasing new eyewear. And I like shopping an awful lot. Don't take this the wrong way. I still enjoy perusing frames, spend ridiculous amounts of time in optical shops, trying on every pair in hopes of finding the one that becomes my signature. Like Jenna Lyons, formerly of J. Crew. Isn't she a babe? Style goddess. I have a pair of thick black Chanel cat eyes a la Jenna, and love to wear them with a crisp white button-down and my perfect Club Monaco black pants. The pants fall a couple inches short of my ankle, and the hem kicks just the tiniest bit. The look of a tall girl whose pants are too short. Although I'm under 5'5", I adore the chance to play lanky. I can change my glasses, change how the world is framed for me. But for years, the frame was fixed. Take television, the world of TV in the 70s and 80s. For me, it's a total blank. One activity on a very long list of things I wasn't allowed to do was watch TV. Despite an inordinate number of what I learned were 2x2 rules, none of these rules were ever explicitly stated. Let me paint a picture of how such knowledge might be passed on when no one comes right out to say anything. Let's say someone, we'll call her Pam, has a couple of boys and a husband. They all live on a farm, and Pam is, of course, a stay-at-home mother. Duh, what else would she be? Generally, unless Pam has a will of steel, she is going to abide by the also vague but incredibly idealized concept that a woman's very vaulted place is, you got it, at home. If you asked Pam why her house didn't have a TV, she might look at you quizzically. She might reach up and reposition a pin in her bun, since some of the wispy brown hair she struggled to shape into a modest updo has fallen out. Really, Pam's thin hair wasn't designed to be grown long. But the 2x2 requisite tresses piled high on her head, like the crowning glory a woman's hair is said to be, does not suit Pam. But I applaud her for trying. She is dogged in her determination to execute the fuck out of that bun so she can get a pass to heaven. She hopes. She will ask you questions to start, if she is any good at this stuff. Pam, in this example, comes from generations of 2x2s, so she gets the drift, and she married one of the old guard, so Pam knows how to play the game to win. Although technically, there aren't many generations. The 2x2s started rule-making in the late 1800s. More on that later. Pam actually has no idea why watching television is wrong. She just knows it's a gateway drug to the world. A virtual open door for Satan to worm his way into your heart. Pam knows Satan is one vigilant motherfucker, and he doesn't rest, doesn't stand down, ever. She knows full well that pushing the button on that remote is a one-way ticket to hell, but this is all very tricky to say over a home-baked date square, so she'll employ the tricks of the trade used on her since she was a girl wearing frocks while all the other bad girls wore pants and climbed trees. Pam might ask, gently but directly, what do you get out of watching TV? You might answer something about finding it relaxing, sitting down, watching Mad Men at the end of a long day. And Pam will feel sorry for you, pitying you so lonely you need to pretend to have a life. She pities you for not knowing. If it feels easy, it's a trap. Letting your guard down, enjoying life, feeling happy, is a one-way ticket to the debauchery of the devil. My word, Pam will think, you are making it so easy for the bad man. She will ask another question, probably something like, so you don't spend time together as a family, then? She will say this delicately, but her words are sharp like a Japanese knife. Although Pam comes across as dumb as a brick, because school, too, is just something she did because it was legally mandated, she is actually quite shrewd at this particular game. If we could secretly peer into Pam's heart, which we can because this is my show now, Pam, we know that her most hidden thought is one of gratitude that she wasn't called to go into the work, because that would have been unbearable. It is said that to be called to the work is to hear and heed the still, small voice of God telling you this is your path. The most vaulted and revered place to be is in the work, which is where you go if you are fumbling along in life after high school, and you are coming to the realization that there aren't many options for you because you are maybe not terribly intelligent, or potentially you have bad skin, and you are willing to walk the line of crazy and believe that God is talking to you and wants you to couch surf and offer unscripted guidance to the folks under your thumb in his care for the rest of your and their life. But Pam can't even admit that to herself, and could never, ever admit it, even if someone poured boiling oil on her, which is, of course, what will end up happening to her if she doesn't toe the fucking line and follow all the rules. I remember when we first started going to gospel meetings on Sunday nights. I was 7 and had no idea the world of hurt I was in for. I recall exactly my innocence, an enthusiastic child observing the sedate dress of the attendees. I was intrigued by the women's hair. My mom's short, shiny brown bob was tailored beautifully, and my aunts and grandmas also wore fashionable cuts tweaked at standing appointments with their hairstylists. The girls and women at the meeting had long hair, every one of them. Elderly ladies pinned thinning hair up, and I saw patches of pink scalp. I studied the crowd during meeting as workers went on and bloody on, 2 of them taking turns on the small platform at the front of the rented gymnasium. Young girls and teens wore their hair down, mostly in elaborate braids or with curls tumbling down their backs. I noted no bangs. Older women wore buns. Some were nicely constructed, with pin curls tucked in, or several small buns bunched together. Most were messy attempts, falling down structures with wisps escaping. I don't know what propelled me to ask my dad about the hair. I suppose I wasn't aware yet he was shape-shifting from being the dad I knew, the guy who piggybacked and played Tickle Monster, into someone else entirely. He told me to ask the workers on the way out of the meeting as everyone filed out, shaking hands in greeting. I sometimes wonder how I became so confident in social situations, but I think I can trace it back to being expected to walk up to any stranger and greet them with a firm handshake while looking them in the eye and exchanging a serious "How are you?" If my handshake wasn't good enough, I'd be called to task to do it again, so I quickly figured out pressure and grasp and the illusion of confidence. I asked the first worker of the 2 in line. I remember which of them answered, but I also know that I hated all of them equally eventually. "Why do all the women have long hair?" I said. I was proud of my question. To that point, curiosity had been a good thing. Directness like that is not appreciated by the workers or the friends, and this would have been a doozy. Lips pursed. "Why do you think women have long hair?" he countered solemnly. I had no idea. I'm sure I didn't care that much, but gradually I learned, via doublespeak, the unspoken rules that dominated my life from that moment. And on that, we still had a one-way ticket to hell in our house. My mum allowed for a lot of Dad's rules, not for herself, to be clear, but for him and for us. But the TV, it stayed. Pam would have never been so weak. Instead of sitting down to watch TV, Dad and my brothers and I spent our evenings on the couch parsing the Bible, chapter by chapter. Given this, along with high levels of Stephen King consumption, I developed an appetite for apocalyptic genres in every medium, and have since spent an inordinate amount of time imagining how things would go down given a massive traumatic event on the earth, and how my eyesight would play a role in my eventual and certain demise. The event I worried about for many years was nuclear war. To be clear, I still worry about nuclear war. Caught reading a Sweet Valley High book during class in my 7th grade, my teacher took it away and said, "If you're going to read anything during my class, at least make it something worthwhile." The book he gave me was about the aftermath of a nuclear war when the survivors lived underground. I found that book fascinating. The people lived in large subterranean shelters and ate pellets for food, if recollection serves correctly. And once that door swung open, it has never swung shut. To this day, I immerse myself in what-if scenarios created by dystopian skilled theorists like those writers who work for Westworld. I also posit situations and outcomes to myself. What if there's a bomb today? The imagined aftermaths are not overarching views of how civilization will survive or not, nor are they philosophical treatises on the nature of humankind. No, these are very specific and detailed personal plans which unravel from the moment I allow them space in my brain. For instance, if I'm driving to the grocery store and it crosses my mind that there could be, at this moment, a bomb being launched, and I am privy to this knowledge, I unfurl exactly what I would do. First, I drive to the school where my smaller children are and run to save them, hustling them out of their classrooms and into the minivan. I can't run, actually. My knee was reconfigured and no longer understands that gait. I'm hopeful that in an emergency, I'd overcome inhibitions part physical and part, hopefully, psychological. I know as this is happening that I have only so much time. Once I have the little kids, we will race to the high school, which already strikes fear into my heart because portions of this building are impermeable to cell phone signals. Normally, this thrills me beyond belief as I find cell phones and the people who use them generally annoying. With my heart in my mouth, I will send the eldest a message, something that clearly conveys the severity of the situation and rocks her from her typical rule-following and consequence-aware state, and she will race to the van where we are waiting ever so impatiently. She can actually race. She is a runner, thank God. I now have two choices. Taking them home where we have all our things and there is the comfort of knowing there is an emergency supply kit that the Canadian government recommends all Canadians have, although my husband continues to put it in obscure and unreachable places instead of accessible and logical spots, or to the farm where there are generators and water and wood and guns. The catch is the location of the farm. It's near enough the city to qualify as urban rural. And so I envision hordes of starving, ruthless city folk eventually making their way to the outskirts because they desire nothing more than to hole up and start over a la Walking Dead. The farm is also, unfortunately, located near the provincial penitentiary. I comfort myself when I think about these things by assuming that jail dwellers, once order has been lost and chaos reigns, will head for home and family and begin their journeys toward the city on foot. Some of the more savvy, canny criminals, however, will apply logic to this complete breakdown in social order and will instead head the other way, perhaps to a clean and modern farmhouse with equipment and supplies, and they will assume correctly firearms. These will be, obviously, by this act of contemplation and thoughtfulness, the cream of the criminal crop, and it would be these shrewd members of the underworld that I would have to then fight off if we choose the generators and well water over the comforts of home and that emergency preparedness duffel bag, hopefully residing deep on a low shelf in the furnace room. When I was young and at a beach or pool, I suffered stress over my poor eyesight. I also despised people who left their glasses on because the water drops on the lenses made them look like the kind of person who wanted to be bullied. Instead of appearing weak but able to see, I chose hidden disadvantage and would leave my glasses with my towel. This worked just fine until it was time to get out of the pool. Alone, I'd scan the beach myopically, hoping for a familiar shape or hazy color to lead me. The fuzzy, indistinct forms of humans would curl my stomach into knots, and I'd wander until I was either close enough to ascertain a familiar face or someone called out. The very second I was allowed to wear contacts, I worked through the horrors of basically touching my own eyeball so no one could tell I was half blind. It's hard for me to say what I would trade for perfect eyesight, but I have considered it. I would not trade a pinky finger, or any finger, in fact, but I would happily give up either one or both baby toes. I do feel that particular trade would be slightly more advantageous than I'm letting on, because I'd fit into pointy-toed shoes better without that little side-lying toe throbbing unhappily. I'd give up an inch, even two, as long as my weight shrunk in proportion, because I'm short already, and I don't need extra padding. I'd trade for a slightly bigger nose. If it turned out I didn't like the new one, I'm not averse to plastic surgery, and while I am not a fan of either anesthetic or pain, I would rise to the challenge. I would not rise mightily, let me be clear. I am an intolerable sick person, but I'd nonetheless rise and get it done, with the blood-soaked cotton in my nose blackening until the doctor yanked it out for me because I'd be too chicken to do it. My physiotherapist once offered me money to let him pull the stitches out of my leg months after surgery because I was too afraid of how the thin thread would feel as it unwound itself from my angry scar. I did find, as an intolerable sick person, the perfect companion if I ever do become bedridden. Google Chinese crested dogs. Apparently, they were bred to look after invalids and will lie completely still for hours at a time. I also like to lie completely still for hours at a time. They look like tiny fancy ponies, and if I get one, I want to call her Principesa in a Spanish accent. In fact, I will always speak to her in a Spanish accent. It's funny. When Y2K worries garnered headlines and conversations for months before it happened, I easily dismissed the fears, perhaps because they were so mainstream. The cult did its damage, and I look for the problems other people haven't even considered. I'm like a ninja of worry, able, without any provocation, to stand unflinchingly on guard against unknown threats, like the tornado or plow wind or asteroid or mall shooting. And don't forget the myriad supernatural potential occurrences. Although it's possible, I am less ninja than I would like. In grade 4, after failing the eye exam, I got my first pair of plastic-colored frames. There's something to be said for that first day with perfect vision. No longer did leaves on trees look like blurred paint dabbed on the sky. Streetlights were not, as I'd assumed, fuzzy halos of light. It was like a reverse acid trip, I'm sure, walking home with my new working eyes, realizing that the world had crisp edges and defined beginnings and endings. I now wear my thick frames in hopes of looking like an intellectual warrior. And then my ultimate worry. Of course, during a zombie apocalypse, there will be food and water issues, and the challenges posed by a lack of access to the healthcare we are accustomed to here in Canada. But my overwhelming worry is less about the potential limb I may need to saw off to escape from who knows what, and more about what seems trivial and yet might lead to my quick demise. What if this happened in the middle of the night? Would I have time to grab my glasses? Perhaps not, if I was awoken by one of my children screaming, or a zombie rustling in my room. I'd have to hightail it out of bed without the opportunity to snag my frames from the night table, and my useless eyes would become the bane of my existence, causing me to mistake humans for zombies and vice versa. I assume this existence sans glasses would not continue terribly long, as I speculate a person only mistakes a zombie for a human one time. Other things could happen. What if a falling tree hit me on the head, and even worse than the long bleeding cut that might become infected? Healthcare in any form, sadly no longer available, was a cracked lens. Would a life of foraging for tinned food also consist of breaking into optometrist offices, searching for 1.25 positive glasses or contacts? Now I can add the physical challenges I bring to the table during an Armageddon due to my lamish leg. Husband and I have talked about this, and while it does sadden me on a personal level, I agree wholeheartedly with his assertion that not only would he leave me behind, still can't run, but he actually might push me toward the zombies so they are distracted while he saves our children. The fact he is saving the children, of course, negates any of my arguments. I worry about the usual stuff, like food and firewood and how many windows we have in this house and how they aren't really all that airtight, and what would happen if the furnace was off. The house would be cold in the winter, and I'd need to consider if it would be warmer in the basement or on the main floor. But this deliberation would be juxtaposed against the necessity of watching for attackers, and would that be served best by being upstairs or down? And I think about all the people who are apparently preparing for their own version of end times by storing heirloom seeds for food and learning how to can things and preserve things and shoot their own game. And I think, I don't know. I might just give up. I'm not handy. My eyesight is poor. I've got shitty knees and very little survivor man type knowledge, although I am, if I may say so myself, a good shot. I probably should have been weeded out of the world gene pool long ago. Part of what the 2x2s espouse is that none of this matters. I suppose that is a fundamental claim of any religion, the concept that this earthly body and how we move it about during our time on the ground is merely leading up to the good stuff. But Pam, of course, knows what God wants for us, which is to have wisdom, to see through the tricks and traps set by Satan, move past them easily, secure in the scripture and faithfulness, and the knowledge that you are towing unmarked life or death lines. The development of the 2x2s was an attempt to rein it all in, to provide structure in a world of temptation. I think about these things a lot if I'm bored or when I'm going to sleep or trying to. I think about how I'd survive, I wouldn't, and how the world would look. That's what gets me, the whole how the world would look question. I think about how maybe it's better to be from here, this land of cold and snow, so that at least there would be a few months reprieve where it freezes and blizzards and refuses to thaw, where the zombies would be frozen along with the landscape, when the survivors weren't chopping wood and foraging for frozen food. We could round up the frozen zombies, dig them out of snowbanks, and dispose of them. We have no curtain on a second-story window in the part of the bathroom where my sink and mirror are. It's annoying, partly because the sun shines in my mirror, hindering the morning makeup routine I revel in. Mostly, it's annoying because I'm forever hiding from people, worried they will see me in this private space. However, it also offers me a high-up view of the street. Not that anything happens on our street, but I have a view in case something does. I started thinking, what if some jokester, some hooligans decided to play at The Walking Dead? What if there were enough of them and they were organized enough and tried hard enough and they did a convincing enough job and I saw them? I'd be putting on makeup early in the morning when life feels good and I'd hear something on the street. I would turn around and I'd look down and many of my fears would come true. I wonder things like, is it possible I could have a heart attack and die? Would I freeze, hide, find inner strength I wasn't aware I possessed? This has worried me off and on ever since I first gave it play in my mind, and then I realized this even more stunning thing. I've been reading Where Good Ideas Come From, A Natural History of Innovation by Steve Johnson, and he suggests that innovation tends to happen concurrently. Like if someone has an idea to invent something, it is purely because the supporting tools and knowledge exist in the world, and so it is likely, or a given even, that this same thing will happen elsewhere at the same time because the world is ripe and ready for it. I applied this idea to the zombie trickster's fear, and voila! There you have it. It is likely there are fiendish people right now planning the when and the where of their awful zombie trickster meanness. I don't know if I feel better knowing that these plans are afoot or worse. It also worries me because a person can never not have enough things to worry about, because perhaps real zombies will come and I will see them out of my window with no window covering, and I will think, ha, I am on to you, tricksters. I know all about the zeitgeist, motherfuckers, and unfortunately, they will be real. There really is no end to this. Or maybe there is. Let Pam keep watch for Satan. Let the zombies, real or fake, gather on the street. My own vision is finally getting clearer. It sees through the old fear that happiness is a trap. It sees the path I chose, the path I choose, which is one of lightness. And if that former life, the one that taught me to worry, looks back at me, it will only see my middle finger firmly in the air, pointing the way forward. All right, here's where I'm supposed to do the awkward dance of asking for engagement. Look, if you're the type who plans zombie escape routes or has strong opinions about apocalypse footwear, you're my people. The subscribe button is lurking around here somewhere doing whatever those buttons do. No pressure, but also maybe just a little bit of pressure. I'm so glad that you're here with me. If you liked this, please share it or click the like button. Again, awkward. I hate asking for this, and yet I must. It's part of the whole thing. So thank you so much for being here.